This conference will now be recorded.
We will begin this meeting in 1 minute. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the City of Salmon Arm Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of Monday, June the 16th. Welcome to you all. Happy Monday. Beautiful weekend in the Shuswap with lots going on. I'll start by acknowledging our traditional territory. We acknowledge we're gathering here on the traditional territory of the Secwepemc people, with whom we share these lands, where we live and we work together. I'd like to welcome those councillors who are with us virtually this morning. Councillor Ganella, Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Lavery, good morning to you all. We have Councillor Lindgren, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Flynn, and myself in the council chamber, along with our staff to help us through our items this morning. We have an agenda in front of us. I would accept a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Ganella seconds. Just before calling the question, I'll check with our CAO to see if there are any adjustments.
None from staff, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to approval of minutes. This is for the May 20th Development Planning Services Committee meeting. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Wallace-Richmond will move. Councillor Lindgren will second. Thank you. Any additions, deletions to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Is there any business arising, councillors? I see none. We're at the disclosure of interest piece. There's two items we're looking at this morning, council. Does anyone have a disclosure of interest over either of those items? Okay, I see none, so we'll all be present for both. The first one is under tab 6. It's a development permit application, number 460. The civic address is 1231 First Street Southeast. Owner AR Broadview Holdings. The agent is Blue Green Architecture and Company. There is a motion for consideration. I'd like to get that on the floor before we pass it over for staff. Councillor Cannon will move it. Councillor Lindgren will second. Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Paymont. Are you going to speak to this item for us? Appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject parcel is located at 1231 First Street Southeast, south of 10th Avenue Southeast and east of Shuswap Street. The OCP designation is medium density residential, and the property is split zoned R14 compact strata multifamily and R10 residential. The R14 portion of the parcel is the area intended for multifamily residential development and is currently vacant. The proposal is for the construction of 2 multifamily row-style buildings with a total of 12 rental units. Issuance of the development permit is subject to the registration of a covenant and a housing agreement to secure the rental housing. The proposal also includes variance requests. The first variance request is to reduce the number of required parking spaces from 20 to 17. Staff support this variance request as there would still be at least 1 parking space per dwelling unit, and some of the units are studio and 1-bedroom units and would likely have less vehicles. The second variance request is to increase the height of the retaining wall from 2 meters to 4.6 meters. Staff support this variance request as the topography on the site is challenging and the proposed retaining wall is terraced and vegetative to reduce the visual and structural impact. Apart from the variance request, the proposal meets the requirements of the R14 zone and aligns with the residential development permit area guidelines in the OCP. Staff support the development permit and variance requests as proposed. Staff are available should the committee have any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Paymont. And I'll just check to see if the proponent or representative is here. They're not in the gallery. If there is a representative with us virtually, please unmute now and we'll give you an opportunity to speak to us. Okay, I do not see anyone present, so I'm going to open it up to councillors for any questions they'd like to ask staff, or if they have comments they wish to make. Start with Councillor Lindgren.
No questions, Your Worship. Just fully in support of this development. I appreciate the amount of thought that's gone into the style of the buildings, the impact on the neighbors, the livability, the congregate spaces. I think it's a really neat idea, and I'm looking forward to seeing it built.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Councillor Lindgren. Other councillors wish to make comment or question? Okay, seeing none, I'll maybe just ask a couple of questions myself. First of all, I agree with Councillor Lindgren. We've been looking forward to this property moving forward for some time, and the plan looks very good to me. I don't have issue with the retaining wall variance that's requested, and I think the argument of the developer based on one bedroom, I believe 6 one-bedroom units, there's 6 3-bedroom units, that a slight parking variance would work. My question, Ms. Paymont, is the housing agreement, I understand it. Is there a density bonusing that was acquired by the developer, and how does that fit with the housing agreement?
Through Your Worship, they did acquire density bonusing for the rental units, which is the main reason why the housing agreement and covenant would be placed on title to secure those rental units.
Okay, that's what I had thought. Is it possible to know the specifics of the density bonusing? Like, I'm assuming it's number of units, but is there, can you let me know how many extra units they were permitted by going the rentals piece and going through the housing agreement?
Yes, Your Worship. I'll just pull it up here to make sure I have that. So they get an extra 2 units per hectare for each rental dwelling unit provided.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate knowing that. I think it's a great trade-off, win-win as far as I'm concerned from the city's perspective. We get more units, and at the same time, we have a guarantee of the remaining rental units for a period of time. So I will also support the development permit and the variances as requested. We'll go to Councillor Lavery next.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I too will support this going forward to council with recommendations, and I think it's a great development. Your Worship, I have 2 questions. One of them is a broader question related through you to staff related to this concept. And again, I accept the premise when you've got studios and smaller 1-bedrooms, you may need less parking. So my question through you to staff, Your Worship, is this idea reflected in the upcoming potential changes to our new OCP that will trigger new bylaws? Will that sort of thinking be reflected down the line as we move forward with the related OCP update and bylaw changes?
Thank you for the question. I'll refer that to our Director of Planning and Community Services.
Sorry, through the chair. Not particularly in the OCP. The OCP supports a review of the parking requirements, but when and if those come, that would be through the zoning bylaw, which is, that review is underway in the background right now. So that any changes to the parking requirements would be in the zoning bylaw.
Councillor Lavery, I'll pass it back your way.
Thank you for that, very helpful. And is that a live consideration? I know we're not there yet, but is that a live consideration about smaller units requiring less parking spaces? Because I think overall there may be a reduction in the requirement of parking spaces that we require.
Mr. Buxton?
Through the chair, yes, it is.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery, please continue with your second
Yes.
question.
Thank you. That's good. My last one, second and last one, is a question and a clarification question through your worship to staff about on page 44 of the under the garbage, recycling, and food waste. And I noticed in the schematic there's a community bin for garbage and recycling, and I'm wondering, there is a statement on page 44 that strata developments can opt in to city provided collection program, but there's some requirements that are required to be satisfied, including all dwelling units must have direct road access and an enclosed space. So does that encompass a community bin for each of these services, or does it require individual addresses for each of these dwelling units for them to opt into the city program?
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. I'll refer that to our Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Thank you, Your Worship. It does not include a community bin. The bins would have to be individual to the door, so individual address, so that any contamination can be followed up with. So what, in this case, the service provider would review the location to see if it's accessible, and basically it would be, if it is accessible and it's identifiable to the doors, then we could provide community service.
Back to you, Councillor Lavery.
Well, thanks for the clarification on that. Again, this is the difference between good general ideas versus practical implementation. I fully support our current interpretation where dwelling units need to be identified for all that control of quality and quantity of materials. So that'll be something up to the proponent to deal with, but I like this and will support this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a third question, Councillor Lavery?
No, I'm good, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, last opportunity before I call a question. See no further speakers, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Council. Okay, we will move now to 6.2, which is a building bylaw number 4725. I think in this case, I'll have staff walk through the report with us to whatever detail they feel is sufficient, and then I will get a motion after that. So I'll pass it over to our Director of Planning Community Services. Thank you very much for the detail of your report.
Thank you, Worship, members of Council. Something nice and light and easy for you on a Monday morning. Yeah, apologies that this is sort of, it's a very meaty item. There is a lot of content here. Hence the desire to sort of put this in front of the committee in advance of trying to get this bylaw for second and third reading. So a bit of a phased approach so that there's an opportunity to review and as noted to get a little bit of public and industry feedback on this. Just note that the heavy lifting on the work on this was Ms. Sadlercover and Ms. Smurl. I'm sort of picking up at the end of the process. So today we'd just like to present essentially a replacement of the current building bylaw with a new one. The changes are substantive enough that trying to do an amendment would be very difficult. So it's a repeal and replace, along with a number of other related bylaws and associated policies. Again, we don't need to advance anything on the policies today. Those will come back for approval at a later point when we come back with the bylaw again. So the purpose is, it's a bit of risk management, it's a bit of general updating. There are some changes required because of code changes and then changes related to small scale multi-unit housing. There's a whole range of things that have required the changes, hence the substantive change. It's based on a core bylaw that's originally drafted by MIABC. Legal counsel for that organization has revised that and updated it, and it does provide bylaws for certain sizes of municipalities. So we use the small city template with revisions to sort of meet our needs. Current bylaw dates to 2012. I mean, some of the changes, there are changes in Part 9 of the Code, Homeowners Protection Act, Energy Step Code and Zero Carbon Step Code, alternative solutions, provisions for temporary buildings. All these are new items that have come up in the last 12 years. I'll quickly duck through. I don't intend to spend a lot of time on many of these items, but just going through sort of sections by sections. All forms in the prior bylaw are now delegated to the director, so if we want to change a form, we don't need to amend the bylaw. The provisions related to solid fuel wood burning appliances are removed. Those are dealt with essentially elsewhere by other legislation, and our building officials are not certified, nor would they ever be, so we're basically stepping away from that. Farm-related buildings and farm buildings, there are exemptions to the building code for low occupancy or low human occupancy buildings. So there's a clarification here as to what that means, and clarifications to where those in the national code, so provisions for areas at which that qualification and that exemption sort of goes to and stops. Sections 6.4 to 6.7 are an important addition. They're a limited application to existing buildings. So this covers those instances when you do renovations or expansions to existing buildings. So where does the new code start and stop, essentially? So this section gives us some clarification that the additions or the alterations must be code compliant. The remainder of the building essentially does not have to come up to code except to the point to remedy any new infraction. So there's some clarifications about how that old building renovations are handled in this new bylaw. There are added provisions relating to shipping containers. That's essentially for consistency with the zoning bylaw. Site plan requirements, there are additions there to require the show calculations for percentage of permeable coverage. That's again the SHMU related changes. The building official can adjust and waive those based on what that official considers appropriate. In Part 7 or 7 of the staff report, there are some changes regarding survey certificates and when we require those. The current bylaw is a bit of an oddity. It requires applicants to provide a site survey in instances when we're pretty clear what's happening, and then it doesn't require it in instances when it's considerably less certain about where the pins and the setbacks would be. So there are some amendments to clarify that, and the discretion of when that is done is then dealt with in the surveyor confirmation policy. So the bylaw outlines when, and the policy provides the discretion, some guidance on the discretion of how that is exercised. Lapse or permit extensions. So we've reduced the time to commence construction once a permit's been issued from 6 months to 3 months. It's just a lot of time to be holding stuff in the office for 6 months. Section 9, we're allowing photo submission for correction of minor deficiencies, if acceptable to the building official. Partial occupancy, the new Part 17 provides for partial occupancy of buildings. Current bylaw is silent on that, so again, it's an addition. The relocation of building, there is a limit on relocation for buildings over 35 years of age, but there is an ability for the applicant to submit a report to the building official to indicate the building can be safely moved and relocated. With respect to pools, they're currently not regulated. In this case, there are some requirements and standards required for fencing and latching gates. Pretty much those mirror people's insurance policies. It's difficult to get insurance for pools unless you do that anyway. Excuse me, there are new provisions or updated provisions for retaining walls, differentiating on whether or not they support something structural versus whether they support landscaping, and granting the discretion to the official upon whether or not they require that certification. And again, there's a policy that deals somewhat with that issue. Temporary buildings and temporary residences. Well, with SHMO, that issue is far less. But again, this is a consistency with ensuring consistency with the zoning bylaw. Fire safety, part 27. So this section is based on the MIABC core bylaw, and it's not currently addressed in the existing bylaw. So complex buildings don't need to be cited in the proposed bylaw and aren't covered in the policy. That's because the code covers them by a group and class of occupancy. So that's all dealt with in the code. So we no longer need to deal with that in any great detail in our bylaw. Now, the provisions in Part 29 around the zero carbon step code and the energy step code are that we will essentially follow the BC schedule for when those additional steps. There is no provision here for accelerated or advancement beyond those schedules. In terms of the energy step code, we're at step 3 now. The province is moving everyone to step 4 in 2027 and net neutral in 2032. With respect to the zero carbon step code, which is more emissions related, there are no firm dates for that, except that energy level 4, which is essentially very few gas connections, if any gas connections to a new building, would be required by 2030. If we wish to advance implementation, that's possible. Many communities have done that. I would suggest engaging and consulting with the local construction industry around readiness to do that, or at least understanding about what's coming and when. Updated offences under Part 17 or Part 31, orders and enforcement. There are updated provisions around enforcement. The current bylaw allows a penalty of only 25%. Most bylaws allow that fee to be doubled. We're proposing it's doubled to a maximum of 10,000. The details around enforcement are now contained in the proposed policy, and that's actually 3.2. There's a typo at the end of that paragraph. It's the enforcement policy. So again, the outline of what can be done and is in the bylaw. The discretion about how that is exercised is contained in the policy. So that's the building bylaw. Now, I can quickly skip through the associated bylaws and the policy, but if council wanted to stop now and ask any questions, I say it's a lot of content. I understand that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. I think having you continue with the policy piece is fine, if you're comfortable with that, and then council will have the full picture.
Okay. So parallel to the new building bylaw, proposing an amendment to the ticket information utilization, often known as the MTI bylaw, which basically parallels the fines, the financial penalties that can be assigned to infractions of the bylaw. The fines have increased. The most significant fines, $1,000 or offence, are those associated with refusing to abide with a stop work order, do not occupy notices, or reconnecting power and gas connections without approval. Those are the situations where life safety issues are most likely to come to the fore. In terms of the fee for services amendment, the bulk of the fees remain unchanged. In terms of how the majority of building permit fees are calculated, those remain unchanged. As noted from the enforcement section, Part 31, we're proposing that if you're starting work in advance or in contravention of a stop work order, the fee can be doubled to a maximum of 10,000. It doesn't mean it becomes 10,000. If your permit fee is 1,000, it would be 1,000. If it's 5,000, it would be 10,000. So another 5,000 to 10,000. So there are a couple of reductions for professional plan certification in the current bylaw, but they turn out to be essentially token. So the proposal here is that we reduce that fee by the percentage amount without cap, which makes those reductions for professional involvement more meaningful rather than token reductions. We're proposing then with the policy changes to policy 3.2 is repealed or rescinded and replaced with the building bylaw administration and enforcement policy. So this provides the discretion how the building bylaw is enforced. We've used the MIABC template. We've carried some clauses forward with respect to stop work orders. Repeat legislation citations are removed. We just don't need those. And if the legislation changes, it leaves the policy out of date. And the new policy is more comprehensive than the older one. So yeah, I mean, it's updated. The current 3.2 is quite dated. Policy 3.4 is again a rescind and replace. The hiring of consultants to provide technical advice with soil stability is replaced with a more geotechnical and assessments report. This provides the building official the responsibility to require. I mean, the bylaw requires the responsibility to require. The policy provides the discretion about how and when the building official would then exercise that discretion. Yes. Okay. So policy 311, that is simply rescinded. Part 27 in the new bylaw adequately covers those issues with respect to emergency vehicles access. Policy 314, contaminated site profile submissions, is out of date and incorrect, and things have changed since 1997, so that's essentially a rescind. Policy 3.15, permit for a phase or building or complex. All of those items are more than adequately covered off in the new building bylaw, so we no longer need that policy. Policy 3.19 is a new policy that provides the discretion or guidance on the discretion for when a building official could make a determination as to when to require a site survey or when not. So there are 3 critical articles of guidance for the building official under that policy. Again, so we have a number of, I think we have 2 replacements, 3 rescissions, and 2 new policies. So again, take some time to review the policies. We're not asking that council rescind or approve any of those today. Those would be at a later date when the bylaw comes back for probably for 3rd reading. So yes, that's a heavy piece of content for council. We're proposing that that as part of the public consultation, there are two principal avenues. One is with SCIP, the industry professionals. So they obviously have some interest in this on a more general note. Mm-hmm. Also, we're proposing to refer this to the EAC. That committee's expressed some interest in the step code provisions, and I wonder if they might have some recommendations for council coming from that meeting. So we're recommending today that only with respect to the building bylaw, no recommendations with respect to the others, is that recommend to council that first reading's appropriate and that we refer it to SCIP and the EAC. Following that, we would bring it back with any comments that we get from that engagement. I would probably also post it on the website for public review and scrutiny. But as you can see, it's pretty technical, it's pretty dense. It would be difficult for the public to sort of really get into this unless they had an understanding. But we will give them the benefit of the doubt, and if they have some comments, we will allow some feedback generally as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Buxton,
Thank
and
you.
appreciate the suggestion for the motion, which I'll ask for shortly, but I'll give councillors an opportunity. I see Councillor Lavery actually is wanting to move the motion, so if I can get a seconder, Councillor Flynn will second, then we'll open it up to speakers. Councillor Cannon will be first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question, and you are correct. This is a very meaty document, lots to read. But I was wondering if in there, when I was looking through, I know there was details on stop work orders and stuff. Does it deal with when there's stop work orders, for example, on footings or foundations that have been put in and that need to be taken out? Is there a time limit of when that has to be done, and a fine schedule for that? Is that addressed in here?
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Mr. Buxton.
No, that level of detail would be left to the discretion of the officer to determine an appropriate length of time. I mean, you want to give someone a reasonable length of time to undertake that work. Giving them 48 hours is, I would say, is unreasonable. Giving them a month to organize the demo work. So that would be case dependent on the, and then the fines for, so the building official would set the time period within which that remedy has to be undertaken. So whether or not it's removal, repair, replacement, they would set that time in whatever's reasonable. And the penalty for contravention of a stop work order would be in the, quote, the MTI bylaw.
I think it was 1,000 or something.
I believe it is, yes.
1,000. So I'm just trying to bring it back up here again. Was it 1,000 a day, or like after they're in violation of not doing whatever the bylaw officer decides is fair time-wise? And so ultimately it's the bylaw officer that, or the building inspector, I'm not quite sure, that decides, okay, you have 30 days or 60 days or 90 days to do this. And then if you don't go ahead and start doing this, then is it $1,000 a day that you're in contravention of that?
Mr. Buxton.
Potentially, yes. I would not recommend that a bylaw officer does that, because if those tickets are contested, it's highly unlikely they'd stand up. But yes, could there be a day, if following the end of the period given to the applicant, could they be given daily fines? Yes. It's highly unlikely that we would follow that level of enforcement action unless there was an immediate life safety issue stemming from that. But again, if that was the case, we would give them a month. Life safety issues get dealt with immediately.
Councillor Cannon.
So, and what I'm hearing is if it even went that route, it doesn't really have a leg to stand on to collect that. Is that what you were saying?
Mr. Buxton.
Through the chair, collection is an entirely different matter that we should take up at a different time. But I wouldn't recommend to any of our, I mean, it's up to a building official and a bylaw enforcement officer to decide when to write those tickets. But I would not recommend to them that they're issuing daily tickets unless there is an impending life safety issue. Those tickets likely wouldn't stand up in court. And they don't achieve anything if you're simply punishing someone financially. It means they have less money to do the work. So,
thank you, Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. And this will go to Skip and the other public committee. Have dates been set for that, or just waiting for first reading?
To the chair, tentatively I have a meeting next week with Skip. It's sort of contingent on if council was okay today, then that meeting will go ahead. I think with the EAC, I may look to Councillor Lindgren, but I think we're looking at, is the next meeting in September? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there isn't a pressing rush on this, and I say there is a lot of material to get through. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canham. We'll go to Councillor Flynn next.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm remiss, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you for starting my Monday so well. This is truly enthralling, but great report. I was going to ask a process question. You've already kind of answered it because Councillor Cannon asked it, but is the intent with SKIP? Because in my mind, that's the organization that needs to really look at this in depth. They understand what they're doing. I don't understand all of this. Is there a plan to do a formal presentation to them?
Mr. Buxton?
Through the chair. Yes, I would do something of this, similar to this presentation, perhaps abridged to the SKIP board, and I think it may be a week on Thursday that meeting is.
Okay,
scheduled.
well, I'll support first reading and taking this to the two organizations recommended. I would also think we should invite, if people aren't necessarily a member of SKIP, or invite the building industry in some way, shape, or form. I don't know how we do that besides through SKIP to communicate. I've got some concerns with some of the clauses. I am very supportive of the fact we're trying to match up with all the changes with MIA over the years. I think that's key because if our liability insurer has made changes, we should probably have similar changes. I am concerned, would you summarize this as cleaning up bureaucracy, making it more bureaucratic, or making it easier to understand and manage? Because anything that adds to bureaucracy and costs, I'm not really supportive of. But in general, it has to happen. We need to get the input, but would you say that this is just cleaning things up?
Mr. Buxton?
It's a tighter, more effective bylaw. What I do think where there is improvement is that the policies provide some clear exercise of discretion guidance to the building official that wasn't there previously. So in some respects, the previous bylaw sort of left the building official out there, hey, go deal with it.
No, okay.
The bylaws say, hey, here's how you can deal with it. So it provides some guidance and some liability protection for it. It's the policy protection development that our insurers often follow. Your policy, you'll be solid. So I think in this case, we've added some guidance and direction to our building officials through the policy. So from that, I think it's more robust. If there's been more bureaucracy, it's driven by the code, not by the bylaw. The code is always, it seems to be increasingly making demands of builders. So if there's bureaucracy being built, it's through the code, not through the bylaw. The bylaw is basically following the code. So is there more stuff here? Yes, but that's code driven, not bylaw driven. So.
And just so I understood one of your comments, our plan as a community is not to go any faster than the provincial code. We will follow, that's the recommendation, because it sounds like a lot of the bureaucracy is code related, and there's no plan to move faster than the code at this point.
Mr. Buxton?
No, I don't know what I'm going to hear from the EAC. I don't know what I'm going to hear from SKIP. But that decision is council's to make. If you wish to advance that schedule, you can. If you wish to stick with the current provincial schedule, you can.
Okay.
At this point, no, there's no recommendation to advance. Was there some suggestion of that in the OCP? Yes, there was a one of the policies is to consider that issue. And I suspect I may hear something different from the EAC. But again, I don't want to sort of predict what that outcome is going to be. Okay. But I will bring that recommendation back to council.
Okay. The one clause that I'll say I don't support at this point is the 3-month, 6-month. The reason for it to me makes no sense. It says we don't want to hold a file open or the paperwork for 3 more months. Some of these projects, somebody might buy the property 5 years ago, and it might take them 3 to 5 years to even get to this stage. To me, holding it open for 6 months is not onerous, and keeping a file there for 3 extra months isn't onerous. I'd have to understand why it's onerous, because the report makes it sound like it is. And personally, I think it takes a developer or a builder so long to get to the building stage that for us to cut it off by 3 months doesn't make sense to me. So that's one that jumped out, but I'll be interested to hear what Skip says. Might just be me. But thank you again for the detail. I still don't really understand all this stuff, but it was a great report with a lot of information, and I look forward to hearing back from the groups that you meet with.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks, Your Worship. So yeah, there's lots and lots to consider in here. 2 things jumped out at me immediately. One was around the increase to the step code, or the EL 1, 2, 3, 4. For me personally, I'd love to see us go to EL2. I don't think that there is an added expense for a builder to put in an electric stove instead of a gas stove, or a heat pump instead of a gas furnace. And in some cases, there's actually cost savings if they don't have to bring gas into the building and are running appliances on electrical. And I look forward to the discussion at the EAC. There has been some information provided to the EAC already, and I suspect we'll hear supporting evidence from Skip, so I look forward to that report. The other was around item 5, shipping containers. There's a section that says where and if a shipping container comprises a building component, full professional engineering, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to know if that refers to a building that somebody's going to live in.
Mr. Buxton?
Absolutely. If someone's going to be residing, yes.
Okay. So that sort of links to with the new SHMU stuff and the ability to build smaller and more densely on a property. I'm wondering whether or not we have any plans or consideration for including some description of tiny homes in this building bylaw. This seems like an appropriate time to look at it.
Mr. Buxton?
Tiny homes. Not sure. I mean, they are addressed. A home just needs to comply with code. So.
Okay, so sorry, can I just follow up?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Lindgren.
We have no sort of minimum build size, or I'm thinking about Kelowna putting in, I think they've done 160 tiny homes in the last year in a sort of, I think it's 4 smaller developments. I want to know whether or not this building bylaw is going to give us the ability to work within that, or if we decide to go in that direction one day, if this will cover that.
Mr. Buxton?
Through the chair. Yes, it would cover it. That's probably more of a zoning issue than a building bylaw issue. Whether or not that development would comply with the zoning bylaw. I mean, does the building of 20 square meters comply with the code? Does the building of 200 square meters comply with the code? There is no size restriction.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. We've had restrictions on tiny homes in the past, so I just want to see if we're moving away from that. Thanks.
I believe we are. I mean, in the SHMU related legislation, we removed almost all of the caps, minimum and maximum, on dwelling unit size, except within ADUs in the agricultural area, which is somewhat tied to the ALC.
Right.
But yeah, if you wanted to do a tiny home as a carriage home, there is nothing that would prevent that in this bylaw or the zoning bylaw right now.
Okay, so just one follow-up question.
Yes, go ahead.
So in the building bylaws and codes, is there a provision that would allow a tiny home that is not permanent? So either on wheels or on skids or on, I'm not even sure how else you could cite it, but do they have to be permanently mounted on a foundation?
Mr. Buxton?
To meet code, they probably do, yes. In the same way that a mobile home does. That I think is part of the problem with some of the factory built tiny homes, is that they aren't code compliant. And that is an issue that that manufacturer needs to deal with.
Not code compliant as in like appropriate size doors and windows, or if it's not permanently mounted? I'm not sure which you mean.
The details of how it does not comply with code, it will probably be case dependent.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. We'll go to Councillor Lavery next.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and thanks to staff for this. I'm very supportive of this going forward, and there's a lot of good work here. And I really like our approach of discussing these at planning, because that frees up. It's a wider discussion, sort of like a committee of the whole, and it really hones things in when it comes to council. So thanks for that. In my view, this is both what's being proposed, and again, we'll hear feedback back, but it's fair. It's introducing what's a fair and reasonable approach to some of these. I have two general questions, Your Worship, through you to staff. The first one, I got to find it out here. Under the site survey certificates, which, and I agree with, introduces discretionary abilities for our inspectors, and the attached bylaw there, as the policy there is clear. I know in the past, when I first, like 10 years ago, there was a change that required developers to get a site survey of the existing concrete form before adding to the build. And it kind of, if I recall correctly, it kind of came out of the fact that there was the odd occasion of a foundation being poured that was not where it should be and interfered into the setback. So am I correct in assuming that if it's close, those certificates will be required, and if it's not close, they won't be, and that sort of negates that extra hold up in getting going on building a frame?
Mr. Buxton?
That's correct. That's the principle behind this policy, the new 319.
You're correct. It sounds like. Councillor Lavery, please continue.
Yeah, thanks, and that's great. And my last one is more of an existing one related to shipping containers, and I'm not referring to shipping containers that someone could live in or would be structural. And I support the idea of it being certified as appropriate. What is our current requirements for people who put shipping containers for all sorts of reasons on their property? A, is that time defined? Because there seems to be more and more of these. And B, do we follow up on that time definition if there is indeed one?
Mr. Buxton, can you comment on that?
The Chair, yes. I believe they are not allowed per the zoning bylaw in residential areas, except they can be placed temporarily for storage. So if you're renovating your home and you've got to gut the basement, store your furniture in it. So yes, there are instances when you see shipping containers in people's front yard. They are there for a defined period of time. When people say temporary, my first question is, okay, when's it leaving? And then bylaw will follow up. I mean, I have a conversation on this very issue last week with one of the bylaw enforcement officers. We will follow up when that person says it will leave by this date. Shortly after that date, we'll be there to make sure it has departed. And if they're still working on the house, a little bit more time. But if it's turned into a garage, then it's a building. And then it needs a building permit and it has to be done properly. But I say we don't allow them in residential areas as permanent buildings.
Councillor Lavery, please continue.
Yeah, thank you very much. That clarifies things for me. So it's fair to assume, as it is currently now, in a residential area, the use of a container is relatively linked to the permitted time of construction and needs to be removed afterwards. So that's what I'm hearing. Thanks very much for this. I support this going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Flynn, please go ahead.
Actually, I'll talk to staff after. I don't think I need to ask this now.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other councillors who wish to ask questions or comment at this time? Okay, I'm going to ask our CAO just to read the motion out so that everybody's clear on what we're voting on today.
Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Flynn, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that it give first reading to building bylaw number 4725, and that the committee recommends to Council to direct staff to undertake appropriate public engagement regarding building bylaw number 4725, including referral to and discussion with the Environmental Advisory Committee and the Shuswap construction industry professionals.
Okay, thank you very much. So council's clear on the motion. Any further comments on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Buxton, for you and your staff for their work on that. So first reading recommended to council with referrals for input from those two committees and the public in general. Thank you. Councillors, that is our last item on the agenda today. So I will declare this Development Planning Service Committee meeting adjourned. Thank you, Councillor.